What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another post-game show here on Mets Central. This is Mets Fan Reaction Game 97, where the New York Mets dropped the final game of this three-game set against the Kansas City Royals by a final score of 3-2, as now they head into the All-Star break after a very solid first half, I'll say. I'll sit here, I'll be honest. It was a very solid first half. Wasn't the most perfect, half of baseball that the Mets will ever play, but it is very clear to see that, and especially this game showed it off. I mean, look, they still won the series, but I think we can all be honest sitting here and watching and analyzing this game and overall this series as a whole in this first half. While this Mets team is a good baseball team, there is a couple holes that this team needs to fix, and there are some things that this team needs to work on if they want to be a serious World Series threat coming out of the All-Star break, coming out of the trade deadline, and into the final stretch of this regular season and then into the playoffs. So listen, obviously now, like I said, the Mets head into the All-Star break as well as every other team in Major League Baseball, and they're sitting 55 and 42. Currently, first. They'll either be first or second tonight in the division, depending on what happens with the Phillies game. They're currently tied 1-1 right now with the Padres. So hopefully the Padres pull out a win today to keep the Mets in first place. But look, overall, this game wasn't a great game by the Mets. And overall, like I said, this goes along with the entire series. This series in Kansas City, while the Mets did win the series when they take 2 out of 3, they didn't play great baseball. And the biggest reason for that is, again, the offense just wasn't great. The offense was not good enough. It was great to see that the pitching was really good today, and we'll talk about that more. I thought Clay Holmes, he had a solid start, and I thought that Sean Manaea, who made his season debut today, coming off the injured list, he looked fantastic coming out of the bullpen, and he pitched 3 1/3 innings and had tons of swings and miss stuff. His controls were really there, had an electric fastball, got plenty of swings and misses on his sweeper. I thought, his placement on the sweeper was really good as well. Those are two big positives. But again, the issues continue to be that the offense is not contributing, and it's not, and they put the pitching staff in such a tough spot because, as you've seen today, with Clay Holmes, especially today, Holmes had to be, pretty much pinpoint perfect. And then, when he didn't have that perfect inning in the second inning, where he gives up those two runs to the Royals, pretty much the Mets were down right from the start of this game, and they struggled to really get back in this game. And then, it wasn't really till the top of the ninth inning where the Mets were finally able, to compose themselves and get some runs in order to tie that game. Now, look, ultimately they weren't able to, complete the comeback, and they weren't able to complete the win because the Royals did walk this game off in the bottom of the ninth. But, and again, this goes in correlation with something, that me and Evan have both been talking about a ton, when we've been doing our podcast over the first half of the season. When the top guys aren't hitting, this offense is very, very lifeless because the top of the order did not have a great game. And we'll talk about this more probably on the podcast tomorrow, but we've seen how much better not that's been better by a ton, but there was some noticeable improvement by putting Nimmo into the leadoff spot, sliding Lindor down to the 2-hole, and then obviously having Soto in the 3-hole, Alonso hitting cleanup, and then so on and so forth. But I don't get why Mendy decided to change the lineup today and have Lindor back in the leadoff spot, move Vientos in a 2-hole, which, don't get me wrong, Mark Vientos, at least in this series, did have a very good series, and he has been hitting the ball a little more harder. He's starting to put the ball more in the air. He's starting to find the gaps. So I like that we're seeing that out of Vientos currently, especially heading into the All-Star break. I don't get why the lineup was changed. I honestly don't get it. Like for me, I'm all about, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And while the offense wasn't perfect, having those small little adjustments of having, again, Nimmo in the leadoff spot, Lindor in the 2-hole, and then Soto and Alonso 3 and 4. I thought that the offense was at least working, much better. It still wasn't perfect, like I was saying before, but there were at least some noticeable differences. So listen, like I said, I didn't get the change for that. But we'll discuss that more. When we do the podcast tomorrow. Breaking down the series, and then obviously probably this week, since it is the All-Star break, we'll probably have another stream out as well, or maybe we'll do it all in the stream tomorrow, where we'll talk about and we'll break down our future and hopeful trade deadline targets, which that should be exciting because there are a couple, especially, because, we got some news over the last couple of days. It looks like the Diamondbacks will be selling, and the Diamondbacks do have some intriguing pieces. Guys like Eugenio Suarez, Josh Naylor. He's a very intriguing first base option. Obviously, he's not going to play first base because Pete Alonso plays first base, but an intriguing DH option. And then also you have Zach Gallen, who was a starting pitcher there, and probably the Mets are going to have to add one or two starting pitchers heading into the trade deadline. So, but yeah, I mean, listen, like pretty much like I was talking about for this game, like there is not really much to talk about. Clay Holmes was good, Sean Manaea was good, and Holmes was good apart from that 1 second inning. He kind of just couldn't get his location together. He kind of left a couple balls over the plate, and the Royals had some extra base hits in that second inning to put them up 2-0. But after Clay Holmes, after he settled down, he looked really good. Pitched solid 5 innings, and then Sean Manaea came out of the bullpen, and he looked really good. Like I said before, I really like this stuff coming out of the bullpen. So, I mean, yeah, like I said, not much to talk about, but before we get into this, or actually before we break down the game, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe on the channel. We always appreciate you guys' support here on Met Central, and also to make sure to hit the notification bell as well to let you guys know anytime we upload a video or go live on the channel. But quickly, I'll just go through the game recap. So starting off in the first inning. Francisco Lindor strikes out. Mark Vientos would hit a triple, so the Mets right away in a quick position. They would they would be in a spot where they potentially could have go up 1-0, but they couldn't bring home Mark Vientos as Juan Soto grounds out. Pete Alonso, after after having a good at bat, getting to 3-0, he's intentionally walked to be put on first base, but Brandon Nimmo could not come through as he would pop out. Bottom of the first, really good inning here for Clay Holmes. He gets Jonathan India. Well, Jonathan India singles up the middle, but then gets Bobby with the ground into a double play, and then gets Vinny Pasquantino to ground out. Top of the second, the Mets could not score here. Ronnie Mauricio hits a single, but then three straight outs, so no runs there for the Mets. Bottom of the second, this is where Clay Holmes would start to get into a bit of trouble. Michael Garcia would hit a leadoff double into left field. He would then hit Salvador Perez with a pitch. So first and second here for the Kansas City Royals. Jack Caglione then grounds out. That would both advance Michael Garcia and Salvador Perez up a base of second and 30 with 1 out. Then John Ray would hit a double down the right field line to bring in both Garcia and Salvador Perez. So the Royals would go up 2-0. John Ray would then be caught stealing as he would try to steal third base. A very good throw there by Luis Torrens to get him at third base. Freddie Fermin would hit a single, but thankfully Clay Holmes would get out of that inning as Kyle Isabel would ground out. Top of the third, apart from a Mark Vientos single, no runs there for the Mets. We then go to the bottom of the third. Jonathan India, once again, like the first inning, will hit a leadoff single, but then Bobby Witt again grounds into a double play. So 2 outs there, and then Clay Holmes gets Vinny Pasquantino to ground out to get out of that inning. Top of the fourth, Brandon Nimmo singles, Ronnie Mauricio strikes out, Tyrone Taylor singles, Luis Torrens would strike out, and then Luis Acuna would strike out to get out of that inning. Bottom of the fourth, good inning here for Clay Holmes, gets Mikel Garcia to ground out, Salvador Perez flies out. Jack Caglione would draw a walk, but then Clay Holmes would get John Ray to strike out. We then move on to the top of the fifth. The Mets get no runs there. So bottom of the seventh, a quick 1-2-3 inning there for Clay Holmes. He would get a strikeout of Kyle Isabel and get Fermin and Jonathan India to both ground out. Top of the sixth, Pete Alonso with the leadoff walk, but then the Mets would not be able to score any runs here as Brandon Nimmo hits into a force out, and then Ronnie Mauricio hits into an inning-ending double play. Bottom of the sixth, we'd see Sean Manaea come in to replace Clay Holmes, and I'm just going to bring up Clay Holmes' final pitching line. Like I said, pretty good pitching line here from Clay Holmes. 5 innings, which you like to see. 5 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts, no home runs allowed. His ERA currently sits at 3.31. And look, for Clay Holmes, I understand that probably, his last couple outings haven't been the greatest. However, if you guys go back and recall to, the offseason when the Mets were first linked to Clay Holmes, and then when they signed Clay Holmes, and then we got the news that they were going to look to transition Clay Holmes into a starter, I would say for me, even though like I've stated before on here that, I was a little bit skeptical at first of, signing Clay Holmes and bringing him into a starter, but I started getting warmer to to the idea. And listen, if you told me in the offseason that, by the time we get to the All-Star break, that Clay Holmes would be sitting here with a 3.3 on ERA, I'm sure we would have all taken that. So solid first half by Clay Holmes. Obviously, hopefully he builds on this in the second half. Hopefully he can build up a stamina as well. So, he doesn't, get gassed as he gets later on to his starts. Hopefully he could start giving, multiple games where, he's going 6, 7. And listen, I'm not saying he has to go consistently 7 innings, but, if Clay Holmes could get into a groove where he's constantly giving you, 6 innings of baseball, 6 innings of solid pitching, or he's only giving up, 1, 2, 3 runs a game, I think, we would all take that from Clay Holmes, and hopefully, that's the case from him. So, but like I said, solid first half from Clay Holmes. My only thing with Holmes is, apart from the length, I would like to see the swing and miss stuff start to come back, because that's something that we saw from Clay Holmes at the start of the beginning of the season, where he would get a ton of swing and miss stuff, on the sinker, on the sweeper, on the kick change. But really, over the last month, 2 months that Clay Holmes has pitched, he sort of started to adjust his pitching style, where he's gone away from the swing and miss stuff to more the ground ball outs, to more the weak contact fly ball outs. So personally, for me, I would like to see the more swing and miss stuff come back. But listen, if this is a case like with David Pearson, where he's just more comfortable getting the ground ball outs and getting the fly ball outs, then listen, if that's your pitching style and you feel comfortable with that, then go ahead. I mean, like my preference is one thing, but ultimately Clay Holmes has to do what he's most comfortable with. But like I said, good, solid first half from Clay Holmes. We then, as I said, we move on to the bottom of the 6th. Minaya comes in to replace Clay Holmes. Gives up a leadoff single to Bobby Witt, but then Minaya would, just come back. It would come back after that single, and he would get Vinny Pasquantino ground out, and then we'll get back-to-back strikeouts of Michael Garcia and Salvador Perez. We then move on to the top of the 7th. Tyrone Taylor with a leadoff single. Luis Torrens grounds into a double play. Luis Acuna would hit a single. There would then be a pitching change for the Royals as John Schreiber would come in to replace Noah Cameron. And Francisco Lindor would ground out to end that inning. We then move on to the bottom of the 7th. Very good inning here for Sean Manaea, a 1-2-3 inning where he would actually strike out the side, gets Caglione to strike out, gets Lofton to strike out, and then gets Freddie Fermin to strike out. We then move on to the top of the 8th. There would then be a defensive substitution. Tyler Tolbert comes into right field to replace Cagliano. Nick Lofton remains in the game as a left fielder, and Lucas Ursig will come in to replace John Schreiber. He will get Vientos to ground out. Juan Soto strikes out. Pete walks, but Brendan Nimmo will ground out to end that inning. We then move on to the bottom of the 8th. Kyle is both a leadoff single. But Sean Manaea was able to come back. He would get Jonathan India to pop out, gets Bobby with the strikeout. Vinny Pasquantino hits a single, so 1st and 30 for the Royals. But thankfully, Manaea is able to get out of this jam as he gets Michael Garcia to pop out to end that inning. We then move on to the top of the 9th. Carlos Estevez would come in to replace Lucas Ursig, and this is where the Mets offense would finally start, to score some runs here. Ronnie Mauricio, who had a pretty good game today, he went 2 for 4 with a single and a double. He hits a double into left field. Then a pinch hitting situation here as Jeff McNeil comes in to replace Tyrone Taylor. McNeil, and for me off the bat, I thought McNeil hit a home run here, but just was shy a little bit of a home run, hits off the wall. McNeil hits a triple, so Ronnie Mauricio comes around to score, and McNeil stands on third base with the triple, so the Mets cut the lead down to 2-1. Another pinch hitting situation here is Brett Beatty comes in to replace Luis Torrens. Beatty would ground out. Then another pinch hitting opportunity here as Jared Young comes in to replace Luis Acuna. And Jared Young, first pitch swinging, hits a sacrifice fly into center field. That's able to bring McNeil in to tie up the game here. So 2-2 here. And then Francisco Lindor grounds out to end that inning. Bottom of the 9th, McNeil would remain in the game in center field. Brett Beatty comes into second base. And then Hayden Sanger would come in to catch. So Manaea gets Salvador Perez to strike out. Tyler Tolbert would single. He would steal second base, and then Nick Lofton would hit a single to left field. Tyler Tolbert, with his speed, is able to come around third and score the winning run. So the Royals end up winning this game 3-2. Like I said before, Mets lose this game, still win the series. So a little bit of a sour end to this series, but listen, the good thing is that the Mets were able to win this series, but for me, and I said this yesterday, but I really wanted them to sweep, especially with having both Clay Holmes and Manaea available to pitch today. It sucks. It's just, again, it's what I talked about, the offense. The offense, they didn't show up. They didn't contribute until late. And, if you're going to wait that long to actually score runs and to put pressure on the Royals, most likely you're going to end up losing that game. And, again, this goes back to the fact where I brought up before, where if the top of the order isn't going to contribute, then this Mets team isn't going to score runs until they get major help depth-wise in this lineup at the trade deadline. Because, look, today, Lindor 0 for 5. Vientos, he had a solid game, 2 for 4. But then Juan Soto 0 for 4. Pete Alonso only went 0 for 1. He drew 3 walks, so he had actually a pretty solid day at the plate. And then Brandon Nimmo 1 for 4. When those main guys, and then you could even, put in McNeil into this situation because on a regular day basis, McNeil probably does bat fifth anyway. But, and obviously he didn't start today. He would come off the bench later, like I said, in the ninth inning. But, when those top guys aren't hitting and they're not contributing and they're not, contributing to a bulk of the runs, this offense really struggles because the bottom of the order is just, it's not good enough. Tyrone Taylor, I know he had a 2 for 3 game, but really over these last couple weeks, he hasn't really contributed majorly offensively. Luis Torrens, ever since Francisco Alvarez went down and Torrens has really established positions as a starting catcher, he really hasn't produced. Brett Beatty's been okay. Luis Acuna, I mean, listen, the guy provides good defense. He provides speed, has a good glove, but the guy offensively is not good. He doesn't produce anything. Sanger, again, backup catcher, doesn't produce anything. Jared Young doesn't really produce anything, even though he did a good job, tying up the game at the sacrifice fly in the ninth inning. But this is one thing, and again, we'll talk about this more on the podcast, but going into the trade deadline, it's essential that David Stearns, it's essential that one, he picks up either 1 or 2 big impact bats. And again, I mentioned guys like Naylor and Eugenio Suarez. Those are 2 guys that, would really be 2 big impact bats in the middle of this lineup. But also, the Mets got to add some depth. They do. Maybe a backup infielder. It depends what's going to happen with Francisco Alvarez. And again, we'll probably talk a little bit more about that on the podcast tomorrow. But I know he's producing in AAA. But again, I'm more worried about what Eric Chavez is with Francisco Alvarez than Francisco Alvarez himself. So we'll see. Maybe the Mets do add a backup catcher. We will see what happens. But guys, before I get out of here, I'm just going to go quickly through your comments. MPGZ, what is going on? Tribal Chief looked great in every inning besides the ninth inning, in which he shouldn't have stayed in. Hashtag Lehman something. NPGZ, I don't agree with that. For me, I thought I was at least fine with leaving Minaya out on the ninth inning because one, he needed to start, working on his workload and the amount of pitches he was throwing and his pitch count. So for me, listen, he looked very good in the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning. I mean, obviously he got into a little bit of trouble in the 8th inning, but he was able to get out of it. But you needed to let Minaya, get into a groove and really increase his workload. So for me, I did not have a problem with letting Minaya pitch in the ninth inning. And plus, really, who out of the bullpen was available? I mean, sure, you could have had Brosman pitch in the ninth inning, but if Brosman gets to that inning 1, 2, 3, then you're going to the 10th inning. The Mets didn't have to score, and then who's pitching out of the 10th inning? Because obviously Diaz was usually used in the 8th or 9th inning. He probably wasn't available. Reed Garrett was used in both the 1st and 2nd game of the series, so he wasn't available. Do you want to go to Ryan Stanek? Because I don't. I don't want to go to Ryan Stanek. And, who really else out of that bullpen were you using? Alex Carrillo, he threw 2 innings in the 1st game of the series, so he probably wasn't available. So for me, like I said, I didn't have a problem using Minaya in the 9th inning. It's just, the Royals, they scored. They scored and they won that game. And listen, again, I can't sit here and blame Clay Holmes and Sean Minaya for giving up a combined 3 runs. Because usually when you have 2 guys like that combine for only giving up 3 runs, you expect to win that game. The Mets offense should have done a lot better, and it took them to the 9th inning to score 2 runs, and ultimately that's why they lost this game. Again, this is something that we talked about plenty of times during the season. The bipolar offense. And look, it was great that coming out of the Yankee series that the offense looked like they were finally clicking and getting on a groove because they scored a bunch of runs, they were hitting extra base hits, they were hitting home runs. But I always said I need to see that type of production sustain over a long period of time before I get excited. Because again, we've seen this under the Eric Chavez regime. We've seen it. This offense has 1 or 2 series where they look really good, or where they look dynamic, where they're scoring tons of runs, and then they follow it up with like 2 to 3 weeks of garbage offense. So again, for me, I need to see it sustain over a long period of time. And again, we got it today where the offense was just non-existent until the 9th inning. And again, when your offense doesn't produce like that, you're going to lose games. You're going to lose games. And that's what happened. Hornet Gags, what is going on? This felt like a throwaway game. Good to see Mania back. I mean, listen, I don't agree with you from that perspective, but for the Mets perspective, if they view that as a throwaway game, then I mean that's not good enough. That's unacceptable because you have both Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea going. You have two starting pitchers that could throw bulk innings. Like that's sorry, that is not a reasonable excuse. I don't think that's an excuse. I just think that the offense simply didn't come through and hit well and and they weren't productive. But yeah, I mean, listen, if that's how you see it, then cool. But I don't see that at all. I don't. Eli Willet's first overall pick. Okay, so yes, yeah, I definitely do want to watch the draft after I get off of here. Thank you, MJ, for the update. Two Cats was going on. Sort of a fitting sour end to a kind of disappointing first half. I hope they pick it up during the second half. Absolutely. And the trade deadline is going to be a major turning point in the season because listen, if they have a trade deadline similar to 2022 where they add guys like Daniel Vogelback, Ruff, Michael Givens, Tyler Naquin, guys like that, then that would be severely disappointing, and then I don't think this team would be going anywhere. This team needs to be looking for significant upgrades. Listen, you can go for depth upgrades. I don't have a problem with that because, like, again, the depth of this lineup needs to be improved, but this team needs at least one solid starting pitcher, one or two decent relievers, one solid or maybe even two impact bats, and then, you could fill out the depth from there, but you need to go get some impact players at this trade deadline. Narcolis, Chavez needs to go. Absolutely. We've said that plenty of times here on this channel. Two Cats, I wish Taylor, Acuna, and Torrens could all hit because they are very, very good defensively. Yeah. I mean, listen, that's the thing I can't discredit those guys for. Torrens, fantastic defensive behind the plate, has a cannon of an arm, throws out, constantly throws out guys, attempting to steal bases. I mean, we saw today, I forgot who tried to steal third base, but, Torrens was able to pick him off. Acuna, again, not good enough at the plate, but flashes the leather very nicely. And then Tyrone Taylor is very good in center field as well. And I mean, we saw it in yesterday's game where he made two very good plays in center field yesterday. So again, the defense is not a problem with them. Like, as you said, it's just the offense is not good enough from them, at least. And listen, if you only had one of them in the lineup, you could get away with carrying, one of their bats, but the fact that all three of them are in the lineup, and I know Torrens could probably hit a little bit better offensively, but again, still, you don't want to rely on Luis Torrens for major offensive production. He looked good at the start. He looked good at the start of the season, but I think we all knew, and at least that was my concern with sending Francisco Alvarez down. And listen, Alvarez needed to go down because he was just completely lost. But I said that, okay, cool. Like, Luis Torrens is going to get a bulk of the playing time here, but even then, like, I wasn't too confident just because. At the end of the day, Torrens is a backup catcher. And, so once you start to rely on him for, long-term production at a consistent rate, eventually the cracks are going to start to go through. And that's what we're seeing right now from Luis Torrens. Because like you said, the defense is good right now, but the bat is currently non-existent. Hornet Gags, agree, Cats. If we could get some offense from Torrens, then Alvey would stay in Syracuse for much longer or come as backup. Yep. Why don't the Mets promote some of their pitching prospects? This is from Stanley. What is going on, Stanley? I don't know. Listen, I think part of the reason is because they really want to marinate these guys. They don't want to rush them. And now that the rotation at least starting to get more healthy, obviously Sang is back, Manaea is back. You have Clay Holmes, you have David Peterson, you have Frankie Montas, who came back a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago. So you at least have five solid guys in those rotations. So listen, I would like to see guys like Sproat and McLean come up. I would. I just think David Stearns wants to be patient with these guys. I do. And listen, maybe I don't fully agree with that. I mean, I agree with wanting to be patient with them, but I think at some point you're going to want to see at least what these guys have. And I know Sproat has kind of struggled a little bit since coming up from AAA, but over his last two starts, he's pitched very well. McLean really hasn't hit a road bump at all in AAA. He's really pitched very well down there. And Jonah Tong, even though he pitched in the Futures game yesterday, I don't think he's going to come up this year. Maybe there's a chance next year. But I do think at least he's going to pitch the majority of the rest of the season down in Double-A with Binghamton. I think there's a chance we see him get called up to Syracuse later in the season, like what they did with Sproul last year. But I think next year, the majority of next season, Tong's going to pitch the majority of next year down in AAA. Because again, you're going to have Christian Scott come back next year, and again, we need to see what he has because he's going to be coming off the Tommy John surgery. But you're going to have Scott coming back. You're going to have McLean, who's going to be, potentially fighting for a rotation spot. Brandon Sproul, I'm sure, is going to be fighting for a rotation spot in spring training. So, yeah. So, listen, it's good the fact that the Mets do have these young, up-and-coming prospects down in the system. So, it's just, again, I understand that Stearns wants to be very patient with them, but we'll see what happens. I mean, listen, if there is more injuries to this rotation, which knock on wood, hopefully there isn't anymore. Hopefully these guys can just stay healthy, and the Mets end up adding a starting pitcher to the deadline. I don't think we see any of these guys be called up. Listen, maybe they get called up for the bullpen. Maybe they do because I know obviously we heard the news a couple days ago, but Denzel Nunez, he's having Tommy John surgery, so speedy recovery to him. He'll be out the rest of this year, and then probably for a big chunk of next year as well. And then, we even got an update before this game started about Max Kranick where, obviously he got hurt a couple weeks ago, and it's looking like he might have to get Tommy John surgery as well. So that's two guys in this bullpen, which you were hoping would contribute later down the season. And, obviously if Kranick gets Tommy John surgery as well, he's going to miss, the rest of this year and then a huge chunk of next year as well. So, it's disappointing news, but obviously, listen, we saw how David Stearns ran the Brewers, all those years ago, and we saw how the last couple of years he was there, Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, when those guys were starting to come through, they were coming, they first went into the bullpen, so maybe the closer the Mets get into the playoffs, if they need bullpen help, maybe they call up Sproul and McLean, or both of them, or maybe just one of them, to go into the bullpen and get some experience. We'll obviously see on that, but hopefully we do see that. Hornet Gags, any more news on Edward Cabrera? I haven't seen any news. I know he got hurt yesterday. Hopefully the injury's not too serious because that's obviously one of the guys that the Mets, at least, coming out of, rumors and, out of on Twitter yesterday or a couple of days ago that Edward Cabrera is one of the guys that the Mets were, looking to trade for at the trade deadline. So we'll obviously see what happens with him. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. I'm going to get out of here. Like I said before, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe on the channel, and always hit the notification bell as well to let you guys know anytime we upload a video live on the channel. But that's going to be it from me, guys. Decent first half. Obviously, listen, All-Star break. Hopefully some of these guys, they get rested up. They clear their heads mentally, and, they're ready to head into the second half, obviously before the trade deadline. And then, we go into the home stretch where, the playoffs, the playoffs are soon. The playoffs will be soon among us. So, but yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. See you guys later. Let's go, Mets.